Good evening once again. In the last class, what we have started with Economic Survey 2019 and 20. And in this class, we'll be trying to finish the chapter 4 of Economic Survey 2019-2020. Now let us try to understand. We have done I'll just recapitulate in hardly a minute or two so that what we have done, because it is, I think already एक week pass कर चुकी है. So मैं थोड़ा सा recapitulate करूंगा and फिर हम chapter 4 से start कर लेंगे. I think that will be okay for all of us. Now, I have talked about the theme of Economic Survey 2019-20. That is we'll try to make India an economy of 5 trillion with the theme of wealth creation. We also talked about certain basics about the economic survey. The 2 volume, I have started with the first one. We did the first chapter, wealth creation, the invisible hand supported by the hand of trust. We talked about certain concept here. Similarly, some important indices was also highlighted. Next was the entrepreneurship and the wealth creation at the grassroots. Here we have talked about some around 500 odd district GDP and how the entrepreneurship is having an impact upon them. So we have talked about the data and what is the impact on the wealth creation on that. We talked about it. This was one of the most important outcome, that if we have a 10% increase in new firms at district level, this will have an impact of around 1% increase in GDP or GDP at district level. Now, we also talked in this chapter about pro-business versus pro-crony, that government should focus on pro-business policy rather than the pro-crony policies, and this will have a better impact upon the wealth creation ideas. What is the differences? What are the pros and cons of it? We talked about it. One of you have asked about the creative destruction. I'll talk about it in the last, after finishing the chapter. Okay. Now, let's talk with the fourth chapter, that is undermining markets when government intervention hurts more than it helps. So this is the fourth chapter in the volume 1 of the economic survey, where very specifically the economic survey wants to talk about the impact of government intervention on the market. And it has come up with a very clear conclusion. If I talk in a nutshell, we'll understand it in a very clearly. That it's talking in a very simple way, saying in a very simple way that government intervention, moreover, if we see in a holistic way, it has not helped, rather hurted our market. And that is what this entire chapter is all about. Let's see how the economic survey justifies our. Now, economic survey is saying here that government intervention, maybe it is well intended, maybe the aim is to come up with certain positive outcome, but often we have seen that it has come up with an outcome which is not very which is opposite to the basic cause. Like if you think that the aim of the government or the government intervention should be to create or support wealth creation, the outcome has generally come out to be opposite. That is the stake of economic survey. Now we'll try to understand it, that they have put a statement regarding like this, that the government intervention has not come up with a positive outcome. Is it true? How much true it is, and how we can justify this? We'll try to understand that. And that is why economic survey is very clearly saying that government intervenes and thereby undermines market unnecessarily, and even in area where there is no market failure. So let us try to understand it, that how the economic survey is trying to justify it. Now, here in this table, the economic survey is trying to justify the strength and the weaknesses of market. Now, even though it seems to be a very simple thing, आपको लगेगा कि कितनी simple सी चीज है कि market का strength क्या है और weaknesses क्या है. But believe me, especially in public administration, this question is very constant. That the strength and weaknesses of market or public versus private, these questions remains always relevant. And even in GS and your mains, you'll find these kind of question where somewhere you have to justify the presence of market and somewhere you have to justify the presence of public. So this chapter is important in that term. Now let us try to understand what market can do. Now, obviously, if you remember, in earlier classes, I have explained you a demand and a supply curve. And in this demand and supply curve, we have talked about that how this demand and supply curve keeps or maintains the equilibrium. Now, through this equilibrium, it keeps the prices in checks. And if prices are in check, obviously, this will helps to cater to the consumer properly. So this is the first point, that market helps to keep the prices in check. Now it also helps in use the resource efficiently, because if the prices are being checked properly, then the resources will also be used efficiently. And if it is inefficient, then obviously it will reach to that point where it will be once again be used efficiently. Market has a tendency to promote innovation. It will increase consumer choices. It will create wealth and maximize aggregate welfare. I'll just give you an example. The telecom revolution in India. Now, that is one of the best examples of how the coming up of the market has not only increased the choices, but has also made it the use of resources efficiently and consumer friendly. Right now, the prices are quite low and availability is quite easy as compared to those old eras of BSNL days. Now let's see that what market cannot do and why we need a public sector, or what market limitations are. Now the first point which I'll say is provide public good. There are certain goods where market does not would not like to provide. Like I'll give you an example. Market works with some of the very basic idea like profit making. Now, if you talk about a very simple example of a street light, it's a common good. Common good means it is available by everyone, available to everyone, and equally being utilized by everyone. So whether you are rich, whether you're poor, whether you're taxpayer, whether you're non-taxpayer, every person uses this street light in an equal way. ऐसा तो है नहीं कि आप ज्यादा यूज कंज्यूम कर लेंगे और कोई और नहीं करेगा, सबके लिए इतना ही ओपन है. Now, in this, for private sector, they are not even charging anything. So for them, there is no incentive to go and provide these kind of common goods. Similarly, for public good, like if you go into the different kind of services, generally market does not have a tendency to get into these sector. One of the best example is schools being open into villages. Now, it's very important that the education should be spread to these places. But unfortunately, since there is no profit, generally the private school does not go to villages. Rather, they just stay there in few urban centers. So this is the very good example that market which cannot do, and here the private players, the public players, or the public schools, or the presence of government is important. Now, obviously, it prevents the abuse of monopoly of power. Like we have seen example of cartelization in cement. That certain time, what happens that certain groups create cartels or a monopoly is being created, and then leads to abuse of the consumer. So that could be taken care of with the presence of. That is generally market does not have a tendency to be fair, I would say. Now, internalize externality, overcome information asymmetry, distribute equitably, ensure ethical practices. If you look into the lot of scams, they generally surely talks about the market lacks sometimes the ethical practices. Similarly, if you look into the presence of the consumer welfare, for bodies like for consumer welfare, they are generally helping to or promoting the information asymmetry or promoting information to the consumer. I'll give you an example. If you buy any product, generally you find that what the ingredient of the product are, when it's going to expire, and this is being generally being enforced by the government. Aim is to provide you information, because if you don't have an information, obviously you will not be a strong consumer, and that is need to be done by someone apart from market, because market does not have an inner tendency to provide information or to be at information symmetry. So these are the strengths and weaknesses of market that we are talking about. Now, in two major indices that has been talked about, and I would just try to talk about that also. First one is Index of Economic Freedom, which is being released by Heritage Foundation along with Wall Street Journal, as far as I remember. Now, it uses around 12 quantitative and qualitative factors. 12 quantitative and qualitative factors use कर रहे हैं, जिनको आप 4 हेडिंग के अंदर डाल सकते हैं. You can put them under 4 headings. Now, मेरा सबसे पहला सवाल आपसे ये रहेगा, ये इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम है क्या? व्हाट इज दिस इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम, पहले अगर हम इसको समझ लें तो शायद इनके पैरामीटर्स को समझने में ज्यादा मुश्किल हमें होगी नहीं. लेट अस ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम. नाउ, economic freedom is just the freedom that you can control your labor and your property. आप अपना लेबर, अपना प्रॉपर्टी, इन सब बेसिक चीजों को कंट्रोल कर पाए, सो दैट इज इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम. नाउ, in an economically free society, individuals are free to work, free to produce, free to consume, and free to invest in the way he pleases. तो आप कैसे वर्क करते हैं, कैसे प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, कितना कंज्यूम करते हैं, कितना इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, it is your choice. You are not forced to invest, you are not forced to save, you are not forced to consume. Nothing is, the more the freedom on these front, the better economic freedom is. Simple as that. Now, economic survey believes, and there is a general belief also, the higher the economic freedom, the more the wealth creation, or the more the healthier the economy is. Like, if you look into, there is a direct relation is being considered in terms of the economic freedom and the cleaner environment, greater per capita wealth, human development, democracy, poverty alleviation. इन सारे factors को कहीं ना कहीं economic freedom से जोड़ा गया है. And that is why economic survey is also looking into the importance of economic freedom. Now, what are the major factors or subheading under which this 12 quantitative and qualitative factors will be looked upon? The first one, rule of law. Now, rule of law आपको पता होगा, मैं इसके बारे में बिल्कुल बात नहीं करूंगा, क्वालिटी में आपने पढ़ा होगा. सिंपल टर्म्स में, लॉ का राज. जो लॉ कहेगी, लॉ इज द प्राइमरी thing based upon which you are looking into things. Now, whether it's property right, whether it's a government integrity or judicial effectiveness, this should be based upon rule of law. Then the another important factor which looks into economic freedom, which decides the index of economic freedom, is the government size. That what is the government spending, what is the tax burden, and what is the fiscal health. Now, fiscal health, you will get to know about a lot of factors, but one thing that I like to highlight here is what is this tax burden. Now, tax burden आपने सुना होगा कि किसी भी इंसान, like any person, company or country, अपने income का, the amount of tax that they are paying proportionate to the total income is known as tax burden. आपका total income का कितना percent आप tax pay करते हैं, that is in simple terms is tax burden on you. Now, if you want to understand that what is a tax burden on individual level, I think you must be remembering those income tax slab, that is a tax burden. And on corporate, you must be remembering that slowly we have reduced it from 30% to around 22%. So that is just the corporate tax is a very simple example of the tax burden on a corporate. So these are the few factors. Another important factor is regulatory efficiency, business freedom, labor freedom, monetary freedom, and then open market, that is trade freedom, investment freedom, and financial freedom. So based upon these factors, the economic freedom of a country is index, India is ranking 120, and first rank is taken care by Singapore. And which institute or which is who is the one who is publishing is Heritage Foundation. Now we'll talk about the another index which is being discussed in this. This is the index of global economic freedom, which is being released by Fraser Institute, Canada. यहाँ भी सिमिलर बात करी गई है, इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम को, ग्लोबल इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम को गेज करने की कोशिश की गई है. यहाँ इंडिया का रैंक 79 है और हांगकांग इज बीइंग द मोस्ट इकोनॉमिकली फ्री कंट्री. नाउ यू विल से दैट व्हेन द बोथ ऑफ देम आर economic freedom, how the rank is changing. Rank is changing because the factors change, and the moment the factor change, the rank also change. Now here the factors are size of the government, legal system, security of property right, sound money, freedom to trade internationally, and regulation. That how much regulation is. Now here one of the very important term or a different term that you must know the meaning is sound money. What is this sound money? Now sound money को अगर आपको समझना है तो सिंपल सी चीज समझ लीजिए that the money which is not prone to sudden appreciation or depreciation. The money which is not prone to sudden appreciation or depreciation means इसका purchasing power अगर long term में देखें तो बहुत ज़्यादा appreciate नहीं करता है. One of the best example for India is gold coins. It generally remains the same, so it's a sound money. These days, a dollar would be a sound money. So this is the factor which decides the index of economic freedom. So हमने दो चीजें पढ़ी, index of economic freedom by Heritage Foundation and Index of Global Economic Freedom by Fraser Institute. Here India is ranking 120 and here India rank is 79. Now, let's come to the core of the chapter, that what this chapter is talking about. Now, it is saying that the Indian economy is filled with multiple examples where government intervention has undermined the market unnecessarily. And this chapter focuses on four major acts through which the government has intervened and that has led to the outcome which is opposite to what it was intended to achieve. So first one is Essential Commodity Act. Second one is Drug Price Control Order. Third one is government intervention in food grain market. And fourth is debt waiver. इन चार एग्जाम्पल के थ्रू इकोनॉमिक सर्वे के चैप्टर 4 में कोशिश की गई है समझाने की कि गवर्नमेंट इंटरवेंशन का कैसे आउटकम कभी कभी ऑपोजिट रहता है एंड मोस्टली ऑपोजिट रहता है, इसके थ्रू बात की जाती है. नाउ लेट्स ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड एसेंशियल कमोडिटी एक्ट. नाउ मैं आपको बता दूं, एसेंशियल कमोडिटी एक्ट पे पहले से ही मितेश सर ने एक वीडियो डाल दी है, तो हैव एक्सप्लेन्ड इट, बट मैं अब उन्होंने रिसेंट डेवलपमेंट के बारे में बात किया है. मैं इसको इकोनॉमिक पर्सपेक्टिव से थोड़ा सा आपको एक्सप्लेन करने की कोशिश करूंगा. It's an old act, I think you can see, 1955. 1955 जस्ट हमारे इंडिपेंडेंस के बाद. याद करिएगा थोड़ी सी हमारी इकोनॉमी की पोजीशन क्या है. अगर आप थोड़ा सा भी उसको याद करने की कोशिश करेंगे तो आपको याद आएगा दैट वी आर सफरिंग फ्रॉम फूड शॉर्टेज. Economy is not in a very good condition. We are our GDP is not quite big. People are poor. So here you need to protect things. You need to protect and provide the essential commodity to every citizen. So in that scenario, this act was very relevant. But first, let's try to understand what this act is all about. Now, this act is very simply putting a control on production, supply and distribution. तीन चीजें होती हैं, आप प्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं, सप्लाई कर रहे हैं और डिस्ट्रीब्यूट कर रहे हैं. इन पर इस पे एक्ट के थ्रू आप कंट्रोल स्टैब्लिश कर सकते हैं. Even in trade and commerce, the certain goods are in trade and commerce. Now, certain goods, according to this act, will be defined as essential commodity. Now, ये act कोई भी rule या regulation नहीं बताती. ये lay down नहीं कर रही है कि ये rules and regulation आपको follow करने. But rather, ये state को issue करने के लिए बोलती है कि आप control order issue करें regarding licensing, regulating the stock limit, restricting the movement of goods, and requirement of compulsory purchase under the system of levi. Basically आप क्या कर रहे हैं कि आप जितने भी प्रोडक्शन से रिलेटेड इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट हैं उनको आप कंट्रोल करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन और सप्लाई से रिलेटेड जितने एस्पेक्ट हैं उनको कंट्रोल करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं थ्रू द स्टेट गवर्नमेंट. नाउ act is also providing the action to confiscate the stock seized, to suspend the cancel licenses, and even impose punishment, something like imprisonment also. Now, it can help to fix the price limit, and lot of like limits and penalties that are also being attracted. So the fact, if you look into the basic provision here, you'll find out the act is really powerful. And here I have provided the list of the majority commodity groups which are included into the act, like petroleum product, foodstuffs, raw jute textile, drug prices, fertilizers, onion and potato, and seeds of the food crops like fruit, vegetables, and other. So this is giving a holistic picture. A lot of things are under this Essential Commodity Act. And COVID ke is situation mein, I think you must be hearing in news about the Essential Commodity Act, that apart from everything is being at standstill apart from only the essential commodity. Now, recent on 13th of March 2020, the PIB came up with the PIB in the news. There was a news from by the Ministry of the Commerce Affairs, Food and Public Distribution, that the government said that the mask and hand sanitizer will be under the Essential Commodity Act. Now here there are a few terms that has been discussed, that if they don't properly deal with essential commodity, there is one body which comes into action, and the body is PBMMSEC. Anybody who remember what is the body name? Is the Prevention of Black Marketing and Maintenance of Supplies of Essential Commodity Act 1980. So PBMMSEC important है, देख लीजिएगा, because if कोई भी दिक्कत हो रही है, like if state can take action under this Prevention of Black Marketing Act के अंदर ये ले सकते हैं state action. इस recent article है, तो मैंने इसको डाल दिया कि आप जब भी slide देखेंगे आप इसको पढ़ सकते हैं. Now, let's try to understand that what is a major criticism of this act. Like we know that certain goods are essential and this need to be provided to most of the people. But what is the issue with this act? Let's try to understand and how it has been contrary to its objective. Let us try to understand that aspect which economic survey is trying to tell. Now, it's saying that the act is passed in an era. Obviously, it was passed where famines and shortages was the truth, and a lot of time and money goes into the enforcement of Essential Commodity Act. But unfortunate part is the conviction rate is very low. So you try to inform a lot of cases, but conviction rate is very low, and this leads to a behavior called rent seeking. Now, rent seeking is something where you're trying to get an unwarranted money gain or monetary gain from external element. And one of the best example of rent seeking in India, I would say, would be political lobbying, like companies doing political lobbying for their gain. So these kind of behavior goes into leads to the rent seeking, that which of these goods should be under essential, which should not be under essential, what should be the price, what should not be the price, what should be the stock limit, how much should be the production. Since everything is controlled by the government, so this leads to rent seeking and harassment, obviously leads to further harassment. Now there is an anti-hoarding provision is also there, and since anti-hoarding provision is there, so this leads to that a lot of the stockholder, a lot of the traders does not tell the exact stock holding or the storage capacity or the carried forward positions. Now, this is a picture which very clearly explain that how the agriculture market has been got distorted because of the Essential Commodity Act. Now, यहाँ देखिए ये very similarly they are saying, very clearly saying, जब आप production, जब आप supply और distribution तीनों को control करेंगे, so obviously the market forces will stop working. The demand and supply curve will get distorted. And when it gets distorted, the agriculture value chain itself will not be get developed properly. Now, commodity derivative market will also not get developed. It will not be vibrant. Why? Because there is a market intervention. Similarly, there will be less storage to store, less incentive to store. Why? Because if you if you store more, you might come under the Anti-Hoarding Act. Similarly, it can also lead to the reducing the producer profit. Why? Because the prices are controlled. So overall, what it's doing is that this is leading to the increased price volatility, reducing the consumer welfare, and opposite of what ECA is intended to. Because of all these factors, what has happened finally, that the overall agriculture value chain of the product which is under the Essential Commodity Act get distorted, and that is having a quite a negative impact. Now, what could be the way forward? Way forward could be very simple, that you should try to focus more on commodity future market or efficient discovery of market expected future price, then effective forecasting mechanism like stable state policy, increasing integration of agriculture market, then focus on aggregated total private storage capacity, market intelligence could be used. Basically, these are the suggestions. Or overall, they say that the economic survey suggests that the Essential Commodity Act may be repealed, and it could be only be utilized in certain extreme situation like the one right now we are facing, COVID-19. Now, the second example, let's try to look into the second example of drug prices control order. Now, I put on the detail most on my slides and in my lectures. You will see them very clearly. I'll not be discussing most of them into detail from here on, because our idea was to just explain one example in detail and rest of them go through that and understand through the same idea. So they've just focused on these four acts. That is why I put them into the lecture and the slides so that you can go through them and understand it and know the basics of these lectures, these acts especially. Now let's look into this drug price control order. Now basically drug price control order comes under the section 3 of the Essential Commodity Act. Now here what we are doing is, here we are trying to regulate the prices of pharmaceutical drug. Now the question is that how you will decide the prices. Now there are certain list of essential medicine, that is NLEM. Now these prices pre-2013 was decided by a concept based on the cost-based pricing. Now what is this cost-based pricing? It's a maximum allowable post-manufacturing expenses, like the term or the basic idea that through which the cost-based pricing pre-2013 was done, or until 2013 it was done through maximum allowable post-manufacturing expenses. That you have certain expenses in manufacturing and post-manufacturing, and if it's certain imported product, then it will have maximum 50% of it. And if it is indigenously manufactured, it will be 100% of that, nothing more than that. But 2013, the concept has shifted to the market-based pricing. And in this market-based pricing, what we do, that we create a simple average of prices of all the brands within which is present in the market and which is having a share of more than 1%. And we create this average price and we cap it that the maximum markup should be not more than 16% of all formulation specified in NLEA. Now let us try to understand the impact of it. I think the calculation is not very important for you, but impact is more important than how it's impacting the overall prices of the drugs. Now, the regulation of prices of drug through DPCO 2013 has led to increase in the price of the regulated pharmaceutical vis-a-vis a similar drugs whose price is not regulated. Like we'll give through an example that here, glycomet, which price is controlled, is having a higher price. 2013, the change happened. Before that also, and compared to the one which is not controlled. And this is very clear example that how the outcome was that the price will be controlled, then the prices will be controlled. So the prices will get low, but rather the prices has increased rather than getting it low. Now let's try to understand. So here we are looking into the 4 aspect Essential Commodity Act, DPCO. Now let's look into the government intervention into the grain market, the third important intervention. Now here the government intervention in the grain market could be seen that the government is trying to achieve the food security. That was one of the very simple price. Now what we do is they ensure a remunerative price to the producer. That this is the MRP, this is the MSP based upon which you can, whatever the produce you will do, will get this amount of money to you. Now what you also do, first of all you are providing a fixed MSP or a fixed price, remunerative price to the good. Then what you do, that you also try to control the input cost prices like fertilizer, water, electricity, output prices, storage and procurement through multiple way. And you also try to help in purchase, store and move transport by FCI. So this is the government intervention in the grain market. We are here trying to understand that थ्रू व्हाट वेज गवर्नमेंट किन किन तरीके से ग्रेन मार्केट में इंटरवीन करती है. तो पहला तो है कि आपने रेम्यूनरेटरी प्राइसेस कर दिए प्रोड्यूसर के इंटरेस्ट को सेफगार्ड करने के लिए. इनपुट प्राइसेस को कंट्रोल किया फर्टिलाइजर, वाटर, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी और इन सब चीजों के थ्रू. एंड एफसीआईज के थ्रू आपने उनको परचेस, स्टोर, मूव, ट्रांसपोर्ट, डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करने के लिए भी उनको भी कंट्रोल किया. सो दीज आर द सेक्टर्स इन विच द गवर्नमेंट इंटरवेंशन इन फूड मार्केट. नाउ ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या था इनका कि एमएसपी के थ्रू मिनिमम सपोर्ट प्राइस है. अगर आप प्रोड्यूस करते हैं फूड ग्रेन तो आपको मिनिमम इतना पैसा तो मिल जाएगा ताकि आपको अगर बम्पर प्रोड्यूस हो तो आपको घाटा ना हो. आउटकम क्या निकला? दैट एमएसपी हैज बिकम द बेंचमार्क प्राइस. नो मैटर हाउ मच इज द more or less is the produce, MSP generally has become the benchmark price, that this is the price, is the top price at which the produce will be sold. आपने और ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या था आपका कि आप डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ फूड ग्रेन करेंगे पीडीएस के लिए सो दैट द अंडर सेक्शन और द वल्नरेबल सेक्शन ऑफ सोसाइटी कैन get this through the PDS. Now what has led, because of this you also started, the government also started the buffer stock of the food grain for the food security and the price stability. Now let us try to see what has the impact of it. Now government procure around 40 or 50% of the entire food grain that is being produced. In some of the states like Punjab and Haryana, we are procuring around 80 and 90% of the produce. Now अगर government 100 में से 80 या 90% procure कर लेती है, even 50 या 60% procure कर लेती है, then obviously in the grain market the dominant player is government. And if the government is dominant player, the private sector does not have the incentive to do the procurement, storage, or the processing of these commodities, because the government is the one who is procuring it. And इसके चलते outcome क्या है? That we can very clearly see that there is a lack of investment in the storage capacity. We don't have proper storage capacity. We don't have proper processing of these commodities because government is taking the large chunk of the production every year. Now the concerns, let's try to look into the concerns. There's a increasing trend of MSP prices, increase in the MSP prices to incentivize the farmer, and this has led to that those जैसे wheat है, rice है, sugar cane है, जिनकी भी prices पहले ही से fixed हैं, the farmers try to produce them only, and this is impacting the diversification of agriculture. So that is one of the major concerns. Opposite, once again, we are seeing example of how this is leading to an opposite impact. Now, market prices also do not offer remunerative option to farmers and MSP. In impact, maximum prices rather than the floor prices. So this is MSP was considered to be the floor prices, but now it has become the maximum prices. So what is once again we are saying the opposite of what it has intended to aim. Now, similarly, most of the farmers are focusing on production of the rice and the wheat. Then economic cost of the FCI of acquiring, storage, and distributing of the food grain is about 40% more than the procurement price. So this is also once again very inefficient. Now, the focus of the market is that the FCI present should be to enhance the efficiency and not to produce the inefficiency. But overall, we see or the economic survey observed that the increasing inefficiency of the FCI finally increases the not only increase in the level of the stock, but also lead to the wastage of the resources. So now there are certain other examples through which they have shown how they have led to the final negative impact on the storage of the food grains and the food grain sectors because of this presence of your government intervention into the food market. Now, let us look into the way forward. Way forward is very simple that we are not a food scarce country, rather we have a food surplus country, and there have been a substantial increase in the production. So what we need is an incentivization for diversification and economically sustainable production rather than just to produce more of a grain economy. So we need a shift from a grain economy to an incentivization for diversification and environmentally sustained production. Now, a food market should be open for active participation of private player with government as an equal player. So obviously the presence of grain market, in the food grain market, there should be a presence of both the private as well as the government as an equal player, so that more adequate infrastructure of storage and warehousing could be developed. Now, investment in agriculture need to be made, and subsidy need to be trained by improving the long-term viability and sustainability of Indian agriculture. Because sometimes we have seen that the subsidy has not led to, once again, the aim outcome. Now, farmers need to be empowered through DBT and cash transfer. We already started that process which are crop neutral and do not interfere with the cropping decision. So, economic survey is saying that the focus should be on the farmer should be benefited through the DBT and cash transfer, but that should not be linked to a particular crop. Rather, it should be an option given to them to choose their cropping pattern. Coverage of National Food Security Act need to be restricted to bottom 20%, and issue prices of the other could be linked to the procurement price so that the better price discovery can happen. DBT should also be given to consumers, and they have given certain example that there is a move toward conditional cash transfer aimed at tackling problem of food security and poverty and nudging people toward improved health and education. They have given example of Brazil, Mexico, and Philippines. Then transition should be made for allowing physical handling and distribution of food grain to cash transfer, food coupon, and smart card. So instead of giving them grain, the aim should be more toward cash transfer, food coupon, and smart card. And agriculture, marketing, and trade and distribution policy need to be aligned so that the farmer can receive correct signal for diversification and remunerative and sustainable production. So basically, we need a basic change where focus should change from a grain economy to more of a diversified and sustainable economy in terms of agriculture. Now, this is an example of the graph through which the economic survey has explained that how the single largest producer of the rice and the wheat is single largest producer of rice and wheat. Punjab and Haryana का example यहाँ लिया गया है, उनको explain किया गया है, and how the increasing MSP of the wheat and paddy has increased through the time. There is a secular increase in this, and because of that, the production has also increased. And this graph very clearly shows that how the government procures 40 to 50% of the market share. Now, the fourth example, debt waiver. Now, debt waiver is a topic which is being very much discussed in our entire economy, that what is the pros and the cons of the debt waiver and how it creates an unethical behavior among the one who are under the debt, not to the pay debt because they believe that the debt will be waived off. Now, simple idea is that the aim of the debt waiver is that if you get the debt, you are in a situation, a difficult situation, you will be helped through that. But what happens that when governments start providing the debt waivers continuously, this changes the tendency of the credit debtor for not paying his EMIs, for not paying his debt, waiting of a debt waiver, and finally it changes the behavior, leads to a behavioral change itself. So once again, aim is to help, rather it comes down to be a problem of a debt overhang. Now, what is the debt overhang? Let's try to understand another term here. Now, it refers to a situation where all current income gets used up in repaying accumulated debt, leaving little incentive to invest either in physical or human capital. Now, when a borrower or a farmer suffers from a debt hang, जहाँ पे आपका जितनी भी इनकम है वो पुराने डेट को खत्म करने में या उनके EMIs को देने में ही खत्म हो जाती है. So you are not left with anything. And in this situation, you need a help to the farmer. Now, such borrowers, obviously, they will not receive new funding, either in equity or debt. But farmers को इस debt over के hang के situation से निकालने के लिए, sometimes we come up with a situation of debt waiver. But this debt waivers क्या होता है कि एक बार जब आपको debt trap से निकाल दिया जाता है, so you become habitual of going into this debt trap, and every time you expect that the debt waiver will be done to help you to come out of this debt. So this itself leads to a problem, and the outcome is once again what was not intended. Like increase. What is the negative of it? There is a more loan defaulter. The loan performances deteriorate. The flow of bank credit also to the waiver beneficiary declines. Bank does not want to pay those people. So this leads to a lot of negative impact. Now, in this, apart from these 4 examples, there are a lot of examples are also being provided in economic survey. Now, let's look into the table. We'll go into the table 1 of the economic survey. Now, this talks about certain specifically industrial deregulation or the privatization of several state-owned enterprise whose reduced control on the international trade and investment stand on this context. Like basically what has happened that here the market distortion was created and it was transformed toward developing a more market economy. So this is the table 1. Now, what we are basically talking about that how the overall deregulation has happened. Now, we have given an example of Capital Issues Control Act 1947, which was later on turned into the SEBI Act 1992. Similarly, it has also talked about the ONGC Act 1959, which was later repealed in 1993. Then Banking Company Acquisition and Transfer of Undertaking Act 1970 and State Bank of India Act 1995, where the merger of the bank was announced. Similarly, it is talking about MRTP Act 1969, which was replaced by the Competition Act 2002, the Coking Coke Mines Nationalization Act 1972, the Coal Mines Nationalization Act 1973, which was being repealed in 2018, then National Life Insurance 1956. So these are the multiple examples that has been provided. Now, why I have given you that FERA was being exchanged to FEMA, you need to know these acts, that what was before the act was there and how it has been transformed. Because why these are being repeatedly being utilized in your mains answer as well as in your pre, you can find them in these questions in terms of questions. Now, SICCA is there, how it has been replaced to Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code in 2016. Similarly, the table 2 talks about that how certain acts which need to be transformed, which has not been repealed, which need certain reform, like Factories Act, Essential Commodity Act, FCI Act, SIG Textile Undertaking Act, recovery of debt to bank and financial institution, and the right to fair compensation, that is transparency of land acquisition, rehabilitation, and resettlement. So these are the acts where the government is still intervening and they need to be repealed or amended. And these are the acts where the government has already changed it depending upon developing it to the more market economy. So they have given an ample amount of example here to look into that how the act need to be either repealed, changed, or how they have already changed and what is the impact. Now let's look into the last part. There is a conclusion. Each department and ministry in the government must symmetrically examine areas the government need necessarily intervene and undermine market. Idea is जहां जरूरत नहीं है intervene करने के लिए वहाँ इंटरवीन मत करिए. There are several areas in Indian economy. Idea is very simple that the Indian economy needlessly not intervene to undermine the market. Rather, different economic setting, possibly market failure need to be understood, and the unnecessary government intervention need to be taken away to have a more competitive market and spur investment and economic growth. This is all from my side for this chapter. Hope you understood. We'll share the slide, I think, into this or the next of the video so that you can just revise them all and get to understand this chapter more. And soon we'll be coming with the 5th chapter of the economic survey. This is all from my side. Thank you. Stay home, stay safe.